So first things first, we're going to want to go into our settings. I'm going to come all the way down here to where it says Music, Photos, Camera, Podcast, Game Center. We're going to go into the camera app. So this is, a lot of people don't know this, that on your phone you can change the resolution that you shoot videos at, the formats that you shoot your photos in. I have mine set up to do pretty much the highest it can possible. You can always go down in resolution, but it's very tough to come up in resolution. So I have mine set up for that. One thing to keep in mind when you're doing that is it's obviously the higher the resolution and frame rate that you're shooting at, the larger the file size is going to be, and the more it's going to kind of clog up your storage. So I pay for extra storage because I take a lot of photos, and you might find that's something you have to do down in the future. But I like to shoot in the highest resolution possible when it comes to my iPhone. And so this is where you would change that. On the bottom down here, it's talking about Apple's RAW, so which is fantastic. RAW, the best way to think about it is when you take a photo with your camera, it's capturing the most information possible at one time. So it's trying to look in the shadows and the highlights. So you can then later on, when you're developing the photo, you can go back in and mess with the shadows and the highlights and really the color balance and all the rest of it. So it's not something you necessarily would use for every single photo you're going to take with your iPhone, but I'll explain kind of more about that in a little bit here. So like I said, coming down after formats, you can change what you shoot video in. You can do a lot of stuff in here. I have my grid turned on for composition when you're shooting. I'll show you that in a minute what that looks like. But I have the grid on for rule of thirds. Some people like it, some people don't. I think it can be helpful sometimes, so I keep mine on. And the rest of these are kind of AI-based algorithms that the iPhone uses to kind of help enhance your photos best as possible. I have mine turned on. Some people like them, some people don't. It's kind of something that you can mess around with and find when you're kind of establishing your style. You'll find that some of them, some might help, some might hinder. So this is where a little bit of experimenting and practice is going to pay off. So become familiar with kind of what these things do. So coming out of there, let's go straight into the camera app. Okay, so coming into the camera app, there's the buttons you know by heart now. Along the bottom, obviously, is your shutter button to turn your camera around, and then your camera roll here on the left. And then moving up one layer, we have all the kind of functions that your iPhone can do. Some people don't know this too, but if you swipe anywhere on the screen, you can change those functions. So from left to right on the iPhone 12, it's time-lapse, slow-mo, video, photo, portrait, and pano. So we'll get into more of what these do in a minute, but I just kind of want to explain the buttons right now, what we're working with here. So that swiping left and right is going to change those things, and then just above that we have the 3 cameras that are available on the iPhone 12 Pro. Different iPhones are going to have the different lenses. Mine, I have the super wide view. I have normal view, which is usually set as default when you open up your camera, and then slightly punched in 2.5x. So it says the 2.5 is great when you need a little bit more reach and you don't want to walk over to your subject. I also use this one a lot for kind of macro shots. The iPhone can focus very close to things, so I use that. I can use this lens to get a little bit closer and take a little bit a better detail shot than I would than just zooming into an image I've taken and cropping. So keep that in mind. Obviously, 1x, we all know and love this one. This is the general iPhone lens. And then one I use a lot to tell the whole story is this 0.5. So you can get nice and wide, get the whole scene in view, and it's really helpful for telling stories and setting the space that you're taking your photo in. You can see on top of my screen right now I have the grid set up. This is rule of thirds. It's for your composition. Typically, just really quickly on composition, there's rules. Rules are meant to be broken. I don't use them all the time, but technically putting something smack dab in the middle of your frame isn't exactly what you want to be doing. You want to cheat it left or right. So these lines can help you kind of set those things up, and so sometimes it's helpful to have them. Another thing that so right above here you see this little arrow up. You can hit that and it'll bring up these functions of your camera down below. So just taking a photo with your iPhone normally, it's going to be making all the decisions for you. It's going to try and guess kind of what you're trying to focus on. It's going to expose the image, and so it's going to do a lot of the thinking for you. But if you'd like, you can start to mess with that and tell it exactly what you're after, and these functions help. So like I was saying, you can push that kind of arrow on top, and then these functions get brought up on the bottom. I just wanted to show you that also, if you don't want to click that little button right now, if you just swipe up, it'll take away the menu we had for changing the video and all the rest, and it'll give you these functions. So let me just go through these really quick so you're familiar with them. We all pretty much know the lightning means it's your flash. So right now I have my flash turned off. I don't really use the flash on the iPhone very often. It's very effective, but I tend to like to go into post-processing and up the exposure if I need, or try and do it that way before I use a flash. Obviously, sometimes you got to use a flash, so luckily we've got one built in. So I have a flash off now. You can turn it on, or you can have it auto. So the camera will be judging if it's too dark and it needs more light to take a photo fast enough so it's nice and sharp. It'll put the flash on for you. I typically leave mine on off. The next one over here is going to be your live. So this is actually a pretty neat function. I have mine off right now, but what you can do is you can take a photo, and I believe it takes 3 or 4 seconds of video before your actual frame. So it's recording that, and you can actually later go back into that and choose which frame exactly you want. So this would be great for really anything that's moving around, and it just gives you another stab at it later on. If you're like, I don't really like the photo it ends up giving me, you can go back into your camera roll, click on the photo, go to edit, and you'll see that you can move back and forth in the timeline, find exactly the moment you want to represent that moment from. So that's pretty cool. One thing to remember with this though is it does take a second to take the image. So it's hard to kind of get images really quick with this one. Also in lower light, sometimes it can be a bit tricky. So really what it'll do is it'll just give you, it's like being able to take the photo over again almost. Like you're going to have more frames behind and in front of the one that it's showing in your camera roll. But the little designation, these like circles with the dots around it is how you know that it's a live photo, and you can go back and select another one. Okay, let's look at the next one. The next one's your aspect ratio. So I tend to like to shoot as wide as possible so I can have the most information as possible that I can go back and later kind of mess with. So 16:9 is what you're seeing in the viewable area right there. This is more typical. What I think the camera comes with normally is the 4:3. Then obviously we have square. We know that pretty well. So I'm leaving mine on 16:9, but this is kind of up to your preference, how you'd like to view it. That's where mine's at now, and that's where you can change it. The next one over is your exposure compensation. I'm going to show you how to manually control your exposure on an iPhone, but some people think that iPhones tend to take images slightly darker. So here you could actually add you can add a whole stop if you'd like of light to your photos, and so they always tend to be brighter or darker, whichever way you like. But this is where you're going to go in and fine tune that. The next one is your timer, obviously. It's pretty self-explanatory. And this is good for not only taking group photos and whatnot, but putting your phone somewhere and taking a photo of something that you want the camera to stay very still for. You can set this, push the button, and then leave the camera completely alone and let it fire its shutter on its own. So this is it's a tool that you don't use all the time, but it's good to know where it's at. So that's going to be your timer function. So the next one over, this is shooting. There's a bunch of cool kind of presets that Apple's baked into here. I personally would never shoot with a preset on, just for the fact that you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot later on. It's going to be baked in. Is my dog going to go to the bathroom? That'd be really funny. I personally don't shoot with the preset already applied. I like to do that later on. But if you would like to, say, shoot in black and white, or some kind of color or whatnot, you can easily put a filter on there and get to it. The next one over is, I think it's only available for the iPhone 12 Pro. It's the RAW function, like I was talking about earlier. It's going to be looking, say that building in the background is going to be looking more in the shadows and up in the sky and the highlights, being able to save those clouds and bring the sky back. You'd be able to do that with RAW turned on after you take the photo. But since a lot of the other iPhones don't have RAW so much, I'm going to leave it off now and let you experiment with that later on. Another thing to know about RAW, when it's saying RAW, it's the format that it takes the photo in. So when you take a photo with your iPhone, you're taking JPEGs. So these they have a natural compression that's built into the photo itself, and so it's easy to email, and they can be very high resolution, great looking images. So RAW is going to be just a different form of compression, but it's actually almost zero compression. So it's taking as much information as the camera can at one time, and it's every time you take that snap, it's looking, like I was saying, in the shadows, and just trying to absorb as much as it can right then. So giving you the freedom later on in post to be able to manipulate it and do what you want. Now, saying that, it's good to also know that it's going to create what we call a DNG file. And this, if you were to transfer that onto your computer, there's a chance you might not be able to open it unless you have Photoshop or another kind of editing program. But you should be able to open it on your phone in most programs to edit with. But that's just something to keep in mind. So when would I use a RAW image? I'd use a RAW image whenever I'm shooting something that I know future me is going to want to mess with more and edit more. It's going to be a lot larger of a file size, so keep that in mind also. But it's a great tool to have now built into an iPhone to be able to take raw images. But it's also something I wouldn't use for everything. If I was shooting with my DSLR, I never shoot in anything other than RAW. So it's a great way to kind of future-proof your photos and give you the most flexibility later on when you're editing. So, okay, let's move up a little bit. So if we go to the very top of the screen, like I was saying, we've got the little arrow, and that's going to bring up the menu for your camera functions down there. On the left, it's kind of a quick way to get to your flash. You can turn that on and off there. You can also turn on and off your live photo, like we were talking about earlier. And then also your RAW. You can't take a RAW image. You can't use the RAW when live is on. It's just going to turn one or the other off. You can't have both on at the same time. So that's good to know for the top. Okay, so that covers most of the functions on the screen itself when you first open your camera. So now I was going to just tell you guys a couple little tips and tricks of actually exposing an image when you take your camera out. So we are on the photo mode, obviously, but if I click around inside here, you notice how the sky got a lot lighter because I had clicked by these trees in the building. I'm trying to open up those shadows. So to do that, the camera's letting more light in. It's making that brighter, but also it's having to bring up, naturally it brings up the exposure of the sky. So it's now nicely exposed. Pretty much the foreground and the trees look really nice, but you see if I click on the background here, the sky, it's going to make that nice and blue. It's actually looking for focus too. So you saw it went out of focus right there. I can't make it do it again, but if I click on the the clouds, it's going to focus on the clouds. So now everything here is darker. I personally would probably take the image. I like kind of the tones here because I know this camera well enough now that I know in the shadows here I could bring them up if I wanted to, and I'm still going to have a nicely exposed sky. But I've clicked on the cloud. So every time you click, not only is it setting your exposure, it's metering off whatever you're clicking on. It's also focusing on that. So it's focusing on all these areas. So I just clicked on the roses right there, and you see my sky is almost completely blown out now. So what if I want it to focus there, but I want to see the sky as well? So a trick to that is if I hold my if I hold my finger, let's say on these flowers here. So now up top he says, so that's your auto exposure, and autofocus is locked now. So what does that mean? That means that if I were to move this camera, like if I put my hand in front of it, you see how my hand's out of focus now. So if I were to click on my hand, it would take off the AF lock and it would focus on my hand. But right now we have locked the exposure, so it's locked in how it wants to take this photo, and it's stopped the focus right there. So now what if I want to bring that sky back in? Well, right next to where I clicked on this little yellow square, there's this sun. So if I just slowly drag my finger down on that sun, it's bringing the exposure manually way down. And if I go the other direction, we can bring the exposure all the way up, letting all that light in. So you can play around and fine tune that exact exposure that you're looking for, and try and bring some of that sky back in. So we might go there. Let's take that photo. And then I can go back in and post, and I can pull out the shadows and bump all that stuff up. So let's say you want to take off the lock now. If you just click somewhere else on the screen, it automatically takes it off. And now the camera is going to autofocus onto my hand. And then it's going to autofocus back there, autofocus on my hand slowly. I need to give it some more contrast to focus on. So that's on my hand, and then it automatically goes back there. It's focusing on my hand, and then it autofocuses back there. Really quick, how we did that again. I'm just going to hold my finger down on the building back there. It tried to auto-expose for that, so it made the sky a lot brighter, but it also made that building brighter so I can see back in the shadows. But like I was saying, how you're going to change that manually. So if you drag just to the right of that square, you drag your finger up and down, it's going to get brighter and darker, so you can fine tune exactly where you want that exposure, and fine tune the autofocus. Okay, that's kind of like, those are the kind of the functions on that part. There's also burst mode that used to be you just hold your finger down on the shutter button. If you do that now, it'll actually just start recording a video, which is pretty cool. There, it's recording video. You can see on top there's the 4, 5, 6 seconds of video. So that'll record a quick video if you don't have time to get over the video function. But if you want to do a burst, if you hold your finger on the shutter button and you slide to the left, and you see it's counting there. That's 33 photos it just took. So we click here and drag over, and there's 10 photos. So that's burst mode is great for any kind of action stuff, or when someone's jumping on a trampoline or jumping off a diving board or throwing a water balloon or something like that, where you're trying to you're having a hard time timing it just right. I think that's probably close to 10 frames a second. That's the autofocus and exposure lock functions, and also I showed you there how to fine-tune your exposure. You can trigger the shutter by the sound button on the sound rocker on the left and right. I believe the top button, will take a photo for you. So if you're holding the camera, let's say with one hand, and you're trying to do a selfie or take a photo with a bunch of friends, if you're holding it on the edge here, you can just click that side button and it'll release the shutter for you.